December 25th, 2024 was meant to mark a day of family celebrations in the peaceful community of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. As residents prepared to celebrate the holidays in the warmth of their homes, an ordinary house in the Oakwood residential district would become the epicenter of a drama that would mark this city forever. The emergency dispatch center received a desperate call at exactly 6:27 a.m. A crying teenager, 16-year-old Sophie Mitchell, stammered words interrupted by sobs. "He's dead. My father. Someone broke into our house. There's so much blood." The dispatcher, despite her experience with critical situations, was touched by the palpable distress in the young girl's voice as she dispatched emergency services to the scene. The Mitchell residence, an unpretentious bungalow at 2847 Oak Avenue, perfectly represented 1980s suburban architecture, a single-story home with 4 main rooms and a modest yard covered in a blanket of snow. The multicolored string lights still adorning the facade contrasted tragically with the hurried arrival of emergency vehicles, their flashing signals creating a macabre dance on the pristine snow. First responders found Sophie huddled on the porch steps, wrapped in a comforter she had apparently grabbed hastily. The young girl with disheveled brown hair and vacant eyes couldn't stop shaking, repeatedly recounting her story. Awakened by gunshots, she had hidden in her closet for over 50 minutes, paralyzed by fear before finding the courage to explore the house. Officer Rebecca Martinez cautiously entered the home, her service weapon in hand. The sight awaiting her in the master bedroom would remain forever etched in her professional memory. Robert Mitchell, 42 years old, lay lifeless on his mattress, his torso pierced by 3 bullet impacts. The once immaculate bedding was now stained with crimson patches, and the atmosphere was saturated with that characteristic ferrous odor of coagulated blood. Preliminary examination of the scene revealed several disturbing clues. A sliding glass door in the living room showed apparent signs of forced entry, with obvious tool marks on the frame. Robert's valuables, his leather wallet and the watch inherited from his father, had disappeared. The bedroom furniture testified to a fierce struggle. Dresser overturned, lampshade shattered on the floor, and the victim's palms bore marks suggesting a desperate attempt at defense. Detective Marcus Thompson arrived on scene less than half an hour after the initial alert. With 2 decades of experience on the Cedar Rapids police force, Thompson possessed a particular flair for detecting inconsistencies in crime scenes. Something about this configuration bothered him. Perhaps the temporal coincidence of a homicide during Christmas morning, or certain elements that seemed too perfectly arranged. The murder weapon was quickly identified, a .30-06 caliber rifle owned by Robert, discovered in the backyard near the hedge, hidden under a snowdrift. The killer had obviously tried to conceal it during their escape. 3 cartridge cases were collected from the bedroom, and ballistic expertise would later establish that each projectile could have caused death on its own. While the forensic team methodically documented the scene, Detective Thompson began assembling the puzzle of Robert Mitchell's final moments. The neighborhood unanimously described him as an exemplary father, widowed for 5 years following his wife Rachel's death from a brain tumor. Robert taught physical sciences at Cedar Rapids North High School, where he enjoyed an exceptional reputation among both students and faculty. The home's interior testified to a bereaved family's efforts to preserve festive rituals. A synthetic Christmas tree stood in the living room, meticulously decorated, with unwrapped presents at its base, several bearing the inscription, "Dear Dad from Sophie." The kitchen retained traces of Christmas Eve preparations, baking utensils, flowered countertop, and a carefully wrapped tray of holiday cookies. Sophie was escorted to the central precinct, officially to remove her from the traumatic environment, but also to deepen her testimony. She persisted in her version with notable consistency. Having gone to bed around 10:30 p.m. after watching a classic Christmas movie with her father, she claimed to have slept peacefully until the gunshots occurred shortly after dawn. Detective Thompson noticed that, despite her apparent shock, Sophie demonstrated a surprising ability to recall minute details. She remembered precisely the dinner menu, the outfit she wore to sleep, and even the interval between shots. 3 rounds separated by a few moments. This memorial exactitude, while claiming to have been petrified by terror, steadily awakened the seasoned investigator's suspicions.
The element that completely overturned the investigation emerged fortuitously. During the systematic neighborhood canvassing, Officer Daniel Foster rang at Nathan Brooks's door, who resided directly facing the Mitchell home. Brooks spontaneously mentioned his home surveillance system installed the previous year following repeated thefts. "My connected camera films the Mitchell's facade directly," he explained. "The system activates automatically during any movement in the perimeter." Detective Thompson felt an adrenaline rush. These recordings could capture crucial elements concerning the alleged intrusion. Brooks immediately agreed to share the video files, using his smartphone to transfer the data. The discoveries contained in these images would radically transform the investigation's orientation. The surveillance device, equipped with infrared technology, had recorded well beyond initial expectations. Sophie's bedroom window was perfectly visible, and the sequences revealed her lighting activating and deactivating repeatedly between 4:12 a.m. and 5:48 a.m., precisely during the period when she claimed to be deeply asleep. The pattern was systematic: illumination at 4:12, extinction at 4:17, reactivation at 4:22, creating a scheme suggesting intentional movements rather than peaceful sleep. Armed with this flagrant contradictory evidence, Thompson immediately obtained judicial authorization to examine Sophie's electronic devices. Computer forensics would reveal layers of deception, transforming Sophie from witness to prime suspect. Her smartphone revealed connections to different house routers corresponding precisely to light variations. Bedroom at 4:12, kitchen at 4:36, hallway at 4:40, and proximity to the paternal bedroom at 4:43, the presumed time of the first gunshot according to the coroner. The most compromising revelations came from electronic communications that Sophie thought she had permanently deleted. Data recovery specialists exhumed extensive exchanges with Dylan Carter, 23 years old, supervisor at a local computer store. These messages revealed an intimate liaison active for approximately 4 months, a relationship initiated when Sophie was only 15, legally constituting sexual offense against a minor under Iowa legislation. The text messages clearly established the crime's motive. On December 23rd, Sophie had sent an alarmed message. "Dad knows everything about us. He checked my phone during my shower and discovered our photos. He's furious and threatens to report you after the holidays." Dylan's reaction was equally compromising. "He's going to destroy my life, my job, my apartment, everything. I risk prison. You have to reason with him." The exchanges progressively intensified. Sophie wrote, "He says if he catches us together, he'll have you arrested for corrupting a minor. This can't happen." Dylan's ultimate message before the tragedy, transmitted at 11:52 p.m. on December 24th, stated, "Whatever happens, erase everything, and don't forget I love you. We'll find a way out." Sophie's internet browsing history, restored despite her erasure efforts, exposed methodical premeditation. The searches included simulating a deadly burglary, duration of powder traces on hands, police and recovery of deleted texts, and particularly disturbing, famous unpunished parricides. These searches were spread over several weeks, proving elaborate planning rather than a spontaneous gesture. Investigators revisited the Mitchell home with these new elements, meticulously searching Sophie's room. Hidden in a ventilation duct accessible from her dressing room, they discovered blood-stained clothes, pajamas showing projections corresponding to arterial splashes from Robert's fatal wound. Gunshot residue analysis on Sophie proved positive, with maximum concentrations on her dominant hand, compatible with using a long gun rather than simple contact with wounds. Testimonies from Sophie's classmates depicted a radical transformation recently: withdrawal, frequent cancellations, defensive attitude regarding her activities.
The trial of the state of Iowa versus Sophie Mitchell began on March 15th in the packed Lynn County Courthouse. The decision to prosecute Sophie as an adult had triggered a media storm, transforming Cedar Rapids into the epicenter of a national debate on juvenile justice. Prosecutor Jennifer Harrison had convinced the court that the crime's sophistication justified adult judgment. Sophie sat beside her public defender, Michael Patterson, wearing a sober charcoal suit intended to accentuate her juvenile vulnerability. Her hair was gathered simply, her face devoid of makeup. Yet observers noted her unusual calm for a teenager facing life imprisonment. Prosecutor Jonathan Wells presented his opening statement with surgical rigor. Honorable jurors, this case concerns decisions, complex decisions, carefully considered decisions, and ultimately the decision to take a life. The evidence will demonstrate that the defendant methodically orchestrated her father's elimination, not in a passionate impulse, but with an icy resolution to eliminate him because he threatened her relationship with an adult who was exploiting her. Wells chronologically detailed the evidence: web searches, correspondence with Carter, video recordings, material clues. He presented Sophie as a calculating murderer who preferred homicide to breaking up. Defense attorney Patterson countered by invoking diminished responsibility, depicting Sophie as victim of an adult predator. Sophie Mitchell was only 15 when Dylan Carter, 7 years her senior, undertook to systematically manipulate and isolate her. What the prosecution calls planning represented the desperate acts of a traumatized child, convinced by her aggressor that her father's legitimate intervention would destroy their existence. Detective Thompson's testimony was meticulous and overwhelming. He methodically guided the jury through the evidence, demonstrating how each of Sophie's lies had crumbled before digital data. The video sequences were particularly devastating, irrefutably proving activity in Sophie's room during her alleged sleep. Forensic psychologist Dr. Emily Rodriguez delivered disturbing testimony concerning Sophie's emotional profile. Her ability to describe the act of killing her father with clinical detachment, as if narrating fiction rather than her own acts, was deeply atypical. While adolescent brains are immature, the manifest degree of planning demonstrates goal-oriented perseverance over several weeks, incompatible with typical juvenile impulsivity. Margaret Mitchell Hayes, Sophie's aunt and Robert's sister, offered poignant testimony about her brother and niece. She described how Robert had totally reorganized his existence after his wife's death, making Sophie his absolute priority, declining professional opportunities and social invitations to privilege his daughter. Her account of Sophie's post-crime behavior was particularly disturbing. Total absence of tears, discussing funeral arrangements like a mundane event, consulting out-of-state university websites the night before her arrest.
The decisive turning point came when Sophie herself chose to testify, defying her defense's recommendations. Dressed soberly, she appeared younger than her age, but maintained that strange emotional distance. She recounted events with disturbing precision that seemed incompatible with the expected trauma of a teenager describing paternal murder. "Insomnia consumed me that night," Sophie testified in a monotone voice. "The idea of Dylan imprisoned, our definitive separation, obsessed me. The safe's code, my birth date, was familiar. I observed Dad sleeping from the threshold for an eternity. The first trigger pull remains unclear, but the noise and Dad sitting up, bloodied, remain engraved. Then I simply wanted to end his suffering." When Prosecutor Wells directly asked about her remorse, Sophie's response sealed the jury's opinion. "I deplore this outcome. I would have preferred an alternative." The flagrant absence of authentic emotion, no mention of filial love, missing him, true regrets, weighed heavily in the judicial atmosphere. After 7 days of debate and 14 hours of deliberations, the jury pronounced its verdict. Silence engulfed the packed room as the jury forewoman stood. "Concerning the charge of premeditated voluntary homicide, we declare the defendant, Sophie Mitchell, guilty." The sentence pronounced 2 weeks later by Judge William Crawford marked minds nationally. Despite Sophie's age, he condemned her to life imprisonment without parole, solemnly declaring, "This court sentences you to end your days in detention.
Freedom will forever be denied you. You will age and die behind bars. The shockwaves from the Mitchell case propagated widely. Dylan Carter, escaping prosecution for murder complicity, abandoned Cedar Rapids immediately, his reputation destroyed. He established himself in Portland under a modified identity, but his digital past pursued him, systematically compromising jobs and housing. Margaret Hayes sold the family property and instituted an educational foundation in Robert's name at Cedar Rapids North High School. The first beneficiary, Sarah Chen, Robert's former student, declared emotionally, "Mr. Mitchell revealed my scientific potential. He believed in me before I believed in myself." The school arranged a commemorative laboratory in Robert's honor, including a meditation space for students and teachers. A soberly engraved commemorative plaque, Robert Mitchell, 1982 to 2024. He taught us scientific wonder. A decade after this tragic Christmas, the case remains a textbook example in debates on juvenile justice. Sophie, now 26, obtained a bachelor's degree via the prison education program and pursues graduate studies in behavioral psychology. In an interview granted 3 years post-conviction, Sophie expressed apparently sincere regrets. "I was blinded then, but Dylan didn't love me. He adored his control over me, and my pathological determination to preserve that relationship annihilated the only person truly loving me." The surveillance camera that provided decisive evidence became emblematic of debates on private surveillance. Nathan Brooks confided his ambivalent feelings. The truth had to come out, but troubling to realize an anti-theft device caused a teenager's life imprisonment. The Mitchell case continues fueling discussions on the balance between criminal responsibility and understanding adolescent neurological development. The questions raised remain. How should society treat serious juvenile crimes? Can an adolescent fully comprehend the definitive consequences of their acts? While Sophie continues her detention, evolving from the teenage murderer toward an adult confronting her acts, and as the Robert Mitchell Foundation scholars embrace scientific careers, the case remains a chilling reminder. Choices made in emotional urgency, motivated by passion, terror, or despair, can annihilate entire existences and family lineages, inflicting indelible trauma.